All right, I'm going to try to explain this stuff as quickly as possible. It is kind of complex stuff, so we're going to do our best though. We've got contrasts and we've got binary oppositions. Sometimes you'll see them kind of conflated, or people will use the same word for the same things, and they really are kind of different. So I'm trying to outline that here for you just a little bit. So contrasts are things that are intentionally employed by an author to help kind of juxtapose two things to reveal a difference or a key idea. Anglicus talked about foil characters a while ago, and that I think that can be an example of a contrast, something that is intentionally employed again to help bring out a difference or an idea, um, an ambiguity, an inconsistency. So these contrasts are inserted and they help make the text more complex because we see that there's more than one way to respond in a particular situation. We see maybe the subtle differences that lie between order and chaos. So when you see things, like I put a couple examples here from Harry Potter. So the contrast between Harry Potter and Voldemort, they came from very similar situations, similar backgrounds, but they chose to respond to those same beginnings in very different ways. So obviously that's kind of a contrast that we can see with characters, or you can even see it within the same character. Inconsistencies with how a person will treat one character over another character. So I put Sirius Black. If you see how he treats his house elf Creature or Snape, it's a little bit shocking when you see how loving and caring he can be to other people. So that adds complexity, right, to that particular character. It's not all good, it's not all bad. Like one of those prompts that some of you wrote about, it's a little more morally ambiguous. So look for those contrasts here. Oops. So another example. Okay, so again, because they're intentionally employed by the author, sometimes they define things through negation. So what I mean by that is like compared and describe things based on what they aren't rather than based on what they are. So notice the emblem, kind of the heart shape with the contrast here. But this is from a famous sonnet by Shakespeare that we might still look at later this year. My mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why then her breasts are dun. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. I have seen roses damasked red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks. So he's comparing her based on everything that she isn't. So again, those contrasts. It's typically we see comparisons, all the things that are similar. This one's contrasting the two to highlight the differences. So just a subtle difference, but something that you'll see a lot in writing and in a lot of the writing that we're going to be reading with Invisible Man. So be watching for the comparisons in different situations, how characters respond. Are you kidding me? All right, I'm going to pause. All right, we're back. So contrasts, those are going to appear. Be looking for them. The things that are compared, the things that are negated, definitely going to come up. Another thing that's going to come up is binary oppositions. So this is a little more of like a postmodern take on literary theory. And here's the basic concept. So as you can see here, a pair of related terms or concepts that are opposite in meaning and set against one another. So they are necessarily mutually exclusive. You can really only understand one by comparing it to the other. And that's kind of where it shifts into that postmodern world. It's very meta. So to explain what it means to be right, you can only really understand that concept if you understand what wrong is. So the two are connected, they're interrelated in some different ways. The one is almost dependent on the other for its existence, or at least for its understanding in a lot of ways. And what you'll see here is most of the time when you see binary oppositions at play, it's not necessarily like an intended feature. I mean, to a point it is, like good and evil, things like that, light and dark, hot and cold. To a point, of course, it's going to be intentional, but I think sometimes you'll see some more subtle ones that maybe the author does not intend that start to emerge throughout the text that can be very revealing as well. So oftentimes, though not always, these are more unintentional features, things that just happen and manifest. When you talk about things that matter, binary oppositions start to emerge from them. So let's look at that. One kind of marker of that is that one is typically what we call privileged. All right, it's more like the preferred binaries, the preferred side. So if we kind of go back up here, right versus wrong. Well, society kind of privileges right. We would rather be right than wrong. Masculine and feminine, right? Things start to get really complex and really kind of uncomfortable really fast in binary oppositions. And that's why they're so powerful. Orderly versus chaotic feels fairly safe. But if you start going into more like gender roles, if we start going into race, if we start going into religion, if we start going into sexuality or sexual preference, right? So then those things start to get a lot more uncomfortable. They're very revealing about society, and they become a source of tension within a story. And tension is where you find meaning. Tension is almost always imbued with meaning. So, okay, in deconstruction, which is kind of a subsect of postmodern literary theory, a deep reading of a text centers on the relationship between common binary oppositions, and then again, male, female, day, night, light, dark, good, evil. And again, one is privileged over the other. Sometimes in a reading, it's going to be affirming all of that. Sometimes it's going to try to be challenging that. So sometimes it's going to be, an author is going to be trying to reveal the inherent weaknesses within that privileged binary. And that's where you'll see them really focusing a lot of their energy. There's structuralists, there's post-structuralists. Post-structuralists, they like to, again, kind of deconstruct text and show the fluidity of language. And then the French feminists kind of jumped out of that. I'm not going to get too far ahead of myself. But okay, so anyways, you might try to look closely at that hierarchy in order to show how it is not sustained throughout the work. Two terms are not oppositional law, but interrelated and interdependent. So as I mentioned at the very beginning, you can't define the one without the other, right? And if you think about, think about the yellow wallpaper, right? If we kind of looked at a post-structuralist reading of that through binary oppositions, we might look at male and female, right? Think about those separate spheres. But a post-structuralist, or within those binary oppositions, you might start to recognize that the one sphere really can't exist without the other sphere. Like men can't have their sphere and pursue the things they want to pursue without women having their sphere and doing the things that they want to do. The male sphere was the privileged sphere. So they would do everything they could to protect everything within that sphere and to keep women in theirs, because the existence of their whole world, of their sphere, was fully dependent and interconnected with women's sphere. I don't know if that makes any sense or not, but it just starts to reveal, again, where does the tension lie? Where's the power struggle? That's where it really gets interesting. So some things to look for here. Okay, sets of related words or word categories. We're going to call these strands. And in the activity that we're doing later today, we're going to identify strands. What you're looking for are groups of words that have kind of an interconnecting logic. A reason that you could group them together and they have a similar meaning within a particular context. So grouping of words together, looking for patterns of words and ideas that exist spread out across a particular text. Okay, so how do these strands become crucial to the overall meaning and sometimes even disrupt the overall meaning? Now we start to get at how sometimes there are unintended messages that the author didn't mean to convey, but that are coming out. And these are sometimes clues to that. I think you'll start to see that more. I'm going to hold off because we're getting way on time. How do these dichotomies reveal what might be thought of as a textual subconscious? Meanings are expressed that may be directly contrary to the surface meaning. So think about this. Um, think about a book like The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, that when it was released was extremely controversial for its portrayal of a black slave as being capable of experiencing the full range of human emotions, a human portrayal of a black slave. And it was extremely controversial. It was banned all over the country in its time. Now it is also banned all over the country, but for very different reasons. Because now, when you look at the portrayal of not Tom, Jim, of Jim, uh, it's super problematic, like very problematic. So, where did that all come from? How can it be true one time, not true another time? We start to look at how these binary oppositions, what's revealed about his attitudes through some of these representations that he did not necessarily intend, but that now we can see because the context of that conversation has shifted. Okay, what do they show? The text is characterized by disunity rather than unity. Um, Look for shifts and breaks of various kinds, moments where they explode or transform into multiplicities of meanings. So you're going to see these patterns again of these binaries that exist. They're going to show up over and over and over and over again. But think about how maybe the meanings of them shift over the course of the book. Our author gave us some clues to that. Our narrator at the beginning in the prologue talked about invisibility. And he initially associates all kind of the negative things about being invisible, but he also starts to say, but there's some advantages to being invisible also. So what maybe at one point is filled with like this negative imagery and like negative meaning perhaps starts to shift and slip over the course of that book to meaning something totally different. So can disempowerment shift into empowerment? Can submission turn into aggression? Be watching for those things and how these binaries start to shift a little bit over time. I think that's going to be interesting. Okay, what we're going to be having you do is move into a practice session here. It's going to walk you through some steps that are going to feel super just kind of monotonous. It's going to seem a little bit ridiculous early on. Bear with me. I'm going to have you guys go slow now so that you can go fast later. You'll start to streamline this process, but early on, this is really going to help you to notice and to account for some of the tension, some of the binary oppositions that are happening and appearing within this particular text. And then we're trying to move you to a place where then you can assign meaning to it. You can use this process to better understand what a text is saying. And we're going to try to have you do this in practice, in groups. So more information coming on that. I tried so hard to keep this like at 10 minutes and it's over 13. I'm going to stop this now. The more you play with this, the more you'll understand it. I know I talked fast. Go back, reread those slides. You're still not going to understand it. But once you play with these for a little bit, you're going to start to build an understanding. And many of our students in the past have found this a very, very helpful way to start to understand and assign meaning to text. Good luck. You guys are going to do great. It's really fun, actually.